real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to be talking about police culture, symbolism, and some of the narratives surrounding those ideas. For that, I have two guests here. One is a first-time guest and one is returning. I have Matthew Wood and Mark Bouchard on the show. Matthew is a public safety professional with a diverse background in military service, law enforcement, private sector security, and academia. He served nearly 18 years in the Canadian Armed Forces and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2006. He then went on to spend 10 years with the Toronto Police Service and was a part-time professor and researcher at Seneca College School of Public Safety. He holds several degrees and a Master's of Public Policy, Administration, and Law from York University. Now he's the CEO of Improvable Incorporated, which is a public safety consultancy. Matt's research and publications focus on police leadership development, organizational culture, legitimacy, and member well-being. And then Mark is a current serving police officer with over 17 years of service between the Delta Police Department and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Between both services, Mark served on their respective emergency response teams, or SWAT, as it might be more commonly known, and spent over a decade as a tactical medic. Mark has served in peer support groups and completed a master's degree in leadership with a research focus on police culture and the impacts on police officer mental health from Royal Roads University. He is now a part of the RCMP's National Tactical Medicine Program and author of the book Setting My Sights on Stigma: Thoughts from an Injured Mind. So welcome to both you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Nathan. And thanks, Matt. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, ditto, Mark. Thanks.
I'm happy to get you both on here. You're definitely both going to know a lot more about this topic than me. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to say all the fancy studies and quotes. So hopefully you can bring your A game on that. But this is definitely a topic that's been around for a while when we talk about culture, police culture, leadership, how those things influence kind of down the hierarchy. But then when we look at things like symbolism, thin blue line, challenge coins, and whatever other things we use to identify ourselves or our groups, and what we're a part of, they've been a topic of hot debate and a lot of criticism. So I think this would be a really good discussion. We're going to kind of dive into this right off the bat. I just kind of want to start with a conversation about what exactly is police culture. So not just culture, but more so on the police side of things. What is it? What does it look like? What do we use it for? So maybe we'll start with you, Matt, since you're the new guy here. I'll give you some time to speak first. And if you could kind of run us through some of this idea of what exactly we're talking about.
Yeah, so when we talk about culture, what we're really talking about is the underlying assumptions, the values, and behavioral norms of a group of people. So culture can exist on all kinds of different levels. We can have cultures within teams. We can have cultures within workplaces. We can have cultures across a large swath of society. At the end of the day, culture is what informs, quote unquote, how we do things. So when we're talking about culture in the context of policing, and I'm sure we'll unpack this a little bit more, but there's a number of different ways you can frame it. But really, when researchers or consultants like myself are speaking about police culture, really what we're talking about are the sort of overarching themes within the profession, the attitudes, like I said, the assumptions, and really just the day-to-day behaviors that contribute to the practice of policing.
Okay. And, I took one of the from one of the articles you had sent me, the definition that they had laid out in culture, or I guess you would laid out. So shared attitudes, values, norms of a group passed from person to person. So go ahead there, Mark.
Yeah, well, you're right. So I read a couple of Matt's articles there, and you cited that. You said, it's how we do things. You're basically referencing culture in general, as opposed to police culture at that point. And that's actually the opening quote from my chapter on police culture and anti-police culture. And it comes from Edgar Schein, who's the top researcher I have found on organizational culture. Because that's what we need to understand within policing. Like you have a subgroup of the population, much like the military or the medical profession. People will have their own way of seeing things and doing things. So that's really what we're talking about. The big thing I've learned about police culture is that there really isn't one monolithic police culture that defines everything. What we mean when we refer to police culture is we're talking about adding up basically an amalgamation of all these little subcultures spread across a giant area. So if you want to take Canada, America, North America, a province like British Columbia, whatever area you're referring to, and then even within each department. So say, for example, I'm with the RCMP now, and you have, let's call it 20,000 cops across the country, and I think there's like 500 and something detachments. Well, take Surrey detachment, one detachment with, what do they have, 500 members? I don't know the actual 600. I'm sorry, I don't know the number, but it's many hundreds of members. Well, just the different patrol squads, you're going to get a different culture. And you can see it in the stats where one of them will do twice as many impaired driving investigations. One of them will do way more, drug investigations or whatever. Just they put their time into different things because that's what they're prioritizing. Like their mental model is, hey, if I do enough impaired investigations, I'm saving a life versus, hey, fentanyl kills and I should focus on that. So it's really understanding that we're amalgamating and taking all these little subcultures. So I like to think of it where look at the culture you're in. And I've been fortunate with coming from Delta Police and then into the RCMP and being on some regional teams. I've seen a lot of different subcultures. I've been to a lot of different detachments, and you can see how people do things differently, people see things differently. And you can look at some kind of universal aspects within, say, a profession like policing, for example, and we'll probably touch on it, but something like danger, right? Policing, there's perceived to be, hey, we're a guardian, we're the protector, we're the sheepdog. There's all these different metaphors that ultimately represent a thought process and an outlook on the world. And I think what we often run into is a difference in that outlook, where some people are coming at it and seeing the problem is police doing violence on society versus the police are looking at it like, well, the problem is there's violence in the society. It's killing some of us. It's killing a lot of you. And we're trying to interfere with it. So it is such a crucial topic because we have these policies, but I'll be honest with you. And I don't know what your experience was, Matt, but I'll say sometimes policy isn't followed.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So look at something like pursuits, right? We write a pursuit policy, but then culture can dictate, yeah, that's what the policy says, but let's go get them. Exactly. And as long as it turns out okay, we just give you a quiet pat on the back and a belly bump and a high five. But then when someone dies, all of a sudden we're like, well, I don't know why they did that. It's like, well, what about the last 100 times that we let someone do it and we did nothing about it? We had a policy that said one thing and a culture that said another. And culture is what truly trumps policy almost all the time.
Right.
So anyways, I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that's my initial thought.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, you're right. And they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. But there's a lot to unpack there, particularly around the context of these pursuits. There's a really prominent example of a pursuit gone wrong just here in the Greater Toronto area that took place in May. The wrong way, heading down Canada's busiest highway that led into a head-on collision and the death of the entire family. But before we sort of dip into that, I want to address something that Mark had said earlier on, the idea that there's no sort of overarching monolithic culture in policing. And Mark's right there. There's a number of different ways that we can frame our understanding of the quote unquote police culture. And a really good way to describe that is it's less of a singular culture and more of a subculture within the profession. But the question is, which of those subcultures is the more dominant? You'll never, like across any society, across any team, you'll never have one single unified culture. You're going to have variance in that. And so, researchers over the years have come to recognize that just like everywhere else, that is very much the case in policing. And so that sort of monolithic or what's known as the occupational perspective of culture has sort of been debunked over the years, and in favor of framing it through different lenses. So, some of the contextual factors that influence the workplace culture in policing, like Mark mentioned, is your location, your geography. Are you in small town Alberta, or are you in big city New York? Are you policing a population that is pro-police with low crime rates and low recidivism rates, or are you policing the opposite? The leaders in charge of your organization matter as well. Their mindsets, what policing priorities do they establish? Is the focus on crime prevention, crime fighting, or is it order maintenance and solving the community's problems? There's all these different contextual factors. And so over the years, you could argue there's about 5 different ways or 5 different paradigms to sort of analyze the culture through. The first being that monolithic occupational model. The second being your organizational model, like the particular police organization you work for. But research has also uncovered that your rank also matters. That the culture, most of the research focuses on the perspective of that frontline patrol officer. But of course, that's where every police officer starts their occupation. But that the unique stressors and challenges that patrol officers face vary from those that, say, middle managers face or top command officers. So there's been variance over time. There's also some research that suggests that what it really comes down to is that personal preference, the type of patrol style you adopt. Again, research has uncovered a whole swath of mindsets that patrol officers adopt in terms of their patrol styles. But the one that I like the most, and Mark, I read a little bit about this in a chapter in your book. It's the idea of the culture within your team, your specific team. So in the literature, they refer to this as the work group perspective. And what they argue is that at the end of the day, the people who have the largest influence on your attitudes, behaviors, and values are those in your immediate proximity, those who are closest to you. So while I'll agree there is no sort of single overarching culture, there are persistent traits across time and context. Traits like conservatism, suspiciousness, solidarity, that excitement-seeking preference. So there, these are the traits that my writing and my speaking focus on, particularly the ones that stay counterproductive to perform efforts.
And if I could jump in real quick, Mark, one of the things I did want to point out is on the leadership side. So we can talk about like the hierarchy, right from the chief on down, but leadership also entails like your field training officer. So when we're talking about that proximity,
big time,
sergeant, field training officer, just senior members in the crew. They're going to set out the expectations, and this is how things are done here, and this is how we hang out on days off, or we don't hang out on days off. There's a lot to be said for just having time in the position or time in a rank, or an informal rank, I'll say. So go ahead there, Mark.
Yeah, well, I'd love to touch on 2 things Matt just said. The first one I'll start with is I agree with a lot of what you said there about the different, geography, location, all those kind of things. But speaking to rank, and I actually started working on a course for police culture. I kind of put it aside for a while. I've been working on a lethal force psychology course. But in that other one, I drew an example of communication. And one of them was a frontline officer. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but she's basically on like a TikTok kind of thing, basically being like, I can speed all I want. And she starts going like, get the fuck out my way kind of thing. And honestly, it looks terrible. Like it's not a good look for us as police. And the message she's actually trying to say, I get. Like I've gone lights and sirens to so many calls where someone is not getting out of your way, they're on their phone, they're not paying attention, and you're delayed getting there to try and save someone. I know that frustration, but it gives such a bad look for our profession of kind of like arrogance and power tripping and all these kind of things that we really don't want to give. Now, as a comparison, there's a police chief, and it was someone over in the UK, and I apologize, I don't have the actual name, but it was they had put out a message, and some of their officers had been stabbed, and he put out a bit of a trying to support message, and threw in there, but we're getting calls for reform, and we really need to look at what we're doing and reform. And he was really criticized by his membership because they basically felt like you don't get it. And the reason I bring this up within culture, what we're often passing on is our ways of dealing with the problem. So we've been taught ways of dealing with problems, both internal and external, that have worked well enough. And so we pass them on to the next generation. And this actually goes on to all kinds of how we interact with violence in society. It's like active shooter training. Columbine happened, and we were taught to just contain schools. We're taught you're going to go home safe at the end of the day. That's the number one rule. And then all of a sudden, we now develop the safety priorities and active shooter training. And now you're going to go in and you're going to risk your life because we found the old way wasn't working well enough. Right. And that's really
it's a shift in mindset.
Yeah, that's what we need to do within police culture is we need to keep evolving. Okay. And that's not the only example, but I'd say, look at the North Hollywood shootout. We had cops responding with revolvers and soft body armor to guys with I think they were AK-47s and full body armor. You can't. Not only could they not keep themselves safe, they couldn't keep the public safe. And they had a shootout all around town for 40 minutes and 20 people got injured. So that's kind of what the evolution of police culture, some parts of it have looked like. So that's the one part about the difference in rank is how we see those problems. Because what a police chief sees they're, no offense, because I know some great police chiefs as well, but they're a little bit more of a politician.
Oh, bingo.
Their job is the budget and council and government and public perception. We don't want to look too scary. We don't want to look militaristic, some of these kind of terms. Whereas that frontline cop, it's a whole different problem. So it's almost like you have two people speaking very different languages because the realities that they are facing are actually quite different. But there's a second point that you mentioned, Matt, because one of the things you mentioned was the suspiciousness. And I actually think if I were to give one, there's a few central pillars within policing if you did want to give it a monolithic aspect, but one of those is actually cynicism.
Oh, big time.
So if you go back to Dr. Kevin Gilmartin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, if anyone out there is in policing and you haven't read that book, go get it. Okay. You need to read it and your family needs to read it. It will really help you. But one of his central themes is the cynicism in policing because we go and deal with people that lie to us all the time and just we deal with the worst of society. It's his example of the scout leader. You don't deal with the 20 scout leaders who actually do a great job helping the kids through the forest and mentoring our next generation. You only get called for the one scout leader who molested some kids. And it starts to really shape how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see others, how you see your coworkers. And I think we need to build more of those concepts right into police training. It used to be if you were lucky, your field trainer told you about that book or your boss or whatever. Now we've hit the point, the more progressive agencies will issue you a copy.
Right.
But a rough estimate, I'm going to guess your average cop doesn't really read it because I've talked to lots of cops who have the book and have not read it. And what we actually need to do is bring that into your training. So we give you these concepts and you're actually taught about it. Just like we teach you how to put up crime scene tape and we teach you how to take notes, we teach you how to deal with the challenges that you're going to face and prepare you for them so that you can actually interact with that world and we can start to intentionally shape our culture for the better. Because the whole point of talking about culture is what do we do with it? It's great to, know the science, know the research, but now we need to actually apply it in a real world capacity. And I don't think we're there yet. I hope we're getting closer to doing more of that, but there's a lot of really good things we could do to proactively shape our culture in a way that will benefit society and the police.
I think
right.
The RCMP is one of the more progressive services in this realm. So they're actually doing these longitudinal studies on member mental health and the physiology side of things. And I remember when I went through in 2011, they were talking about that book and some of the other books that were out there. But I think you bring up a really good point there, Mark, just on the two languages being spoken. Like, it is very much that the front line sees it in one way, any event or whatever's happening out there, and the chief and others at the top see it in a totally different light. I mean, they have different things they got to speak to and different responsibilities, but it is two very different languages. Hence the whole reason for this podcast, because we just go straight from frontline to the chief if we want to say something, right? And say, hey, this is what we're actually experiencing out there. This is the firsthand knowledge, and come on the ride-alongs or whatever else it might be. So, sorry there, Matt. You go ahead.
Oh, no problem at all. And there's also that critical component of middle management as well. When you think about it, those middle managers, for context, maybe a staff sergeant, are the ones who need to translate those larger organizational objectives into the day-to-day tasks that patrol officers carry out. They literally, given their role as leaders, need to sell command objectives. But at the same time, they're also responsible for representing the wishes and the mindsets of the people they represent. They're frontline officers. So they play this really weird sort of middle person role, communicating back and forth between the two. And so, that right there tells us that at bare minimum, we have three different mindsets, three different cultural outlooks, potentially a fourth, because there's been some research that suggests that investigators also have a separate and distinct mindset or cultural outlook. And so when those three or four groups are not operating on the same page, you're just asking for trouble. Cynicism is and its associated trait, pessimism, are very strong, persistent traits in the quote unquote like police culture. That trait's been identified decades and decades ago and continues to be identified today. If you just look at any police meme page, you'll see all kinds of cynical and pessimistic outlooks on life and on the broader profession. And Mark's exactly right. Like Gil Martin mentioned, the cynicism is a product of that routine and consistent exposure to the seedier side of life or the underbelly of society. But it's also a consequence of our interaction with the broader justice system. When you see these repeat offenders time and time again, getting that light slap on the wrist, and being reintroduced into society only to perpetuate the same problems, it's really easy to have your mindset sort of shift into more of a cynical and pessimistic outlook. Nathan, you had mentioned the importance of coach officers in conveying culture, and you're exactly right. People like coach officers or even first line supervisors, like our sergeants or in the context of the RCMP, our corporals, are arguably the most important people in terms of understanding a workplace culture. They're the ones who, as a new recruit joining the service, they're the ones who we look to model. If they're behaving in a certain way, that's implicitly telling us these are the correct behaviors, or vice versa, these are the behaviors not to engage in.
Would you say that just on that last point there, Matt, would you say that the written rules, so policy, legislation, like all these things that kind of shape what we do at work, are they more influential than the norms, so the unwritten rules? Or is there just a balance of it? Like, would one be more influential on, we'll talk about like a constable level, is one more influential on them than another?
Well, just like I think it was Mark's example of the police pursuits. No, it's culture. Culture matters first and foremost.
Yeah,
because it informs quite literally everything we do. There's this one researcher named David Bailey. He wrote a book called Police for the Future, and there's this scathing line in there. Like academic writing tends to be pretty dry at the best of times, but there's a line in there. I'm going to butcher it, but he said something to the effect of, police management treat their personnel like children. The fact of the matter is there are so many policies and procedures dictating every possible action that a police officer could engage in, but it's entirely impractical to expect a police officer to be able to memorize all of that and then carry them out. So at the end of the day, we end up defaulting back to our underlying assumptions, our behavioral norms.
Well, you know what? That's actually a good point too, because I know from experience being in a professional standards branch and talking to them, and sometimes they'll ask you, "Well, do you know the policy on this?" And you're like, "Yeah, but
But
not word for word." And it's like 600 pages. Like I get the gist of it, and I can't regurgitate it to you, but like it's such a weird question to ask. You'll get that in court too, right? Defense will ask you
yeah,
that. Do you know your policy on this? Well, like I know it, but I know kind of the standard way that I go through the steps. But maybe I can't tell you the acronym they created or the in the exact order that it might go. So it's kind of situation dependent, but it's dictated by the culture, the norms that you kind of developed over the course of that time. So I don't know if you had something there, Mark, or you, Matt. Go ahead.
I was just really going to agree with a lot of what you said, Matt. I think those coach officers, field trainers, like that is the first role of leadership. And really, the recruits often mimic the field trainer.
exactly.
Like in a way, you need to find your own style, but often their style starts out as their field trainer. And when you would get a new member on your team and it was a problem, you'd often be like, "Oh, who is their trainer? Oh, yeah, now I get it." Like
Right.
they learned this behavior from someone and it's not helping us.
And what's the first thing that comes out of a coach officer's mouth the second a recruit leaves the training? Forget everything you learned. Like I'll show
Yeah.
you how it's really done.
But that's a problem within our culture is that because I'll tell you this, like I've been primary trainer for quite a few recruits and secondary for a lot as well. And often I would get someone who's just done 13 weeks of their first basic training. And then I'd be like, I don't really get what they taught you because you've come out and you don't actually really know how to search a person. You don't really know how to talk to a person. You don't even really know how to organize your notes, but you think you need to write down your notes when you go to the bathroom. Like it's a joke. And I don't mean to say it's a joke for all training. There's lots of great police training. So I apologize if I'm misspeaking on anyone who's doing police training. I just think the more our training lines up with our reality, like it's something I'm trying to bring into the program I'm helping manage now, is how closely do those align? And if they're not very close, we're going to have a lot of problems. And we need to start shifting the reality of the problems we're facing and the solutions we're giving so that it actually lines up. And I mean, that at the end of the day was like the crux of my book was no one taught me about emotional pain and policing and lethal force decisions and sleep science and all these things that like, hey, good luck. I hope it doesn't go badly like it has for so many other cops throughout history. And I think we just need to get real about how we teach people.
This might be where a little bit of my cynicism comes in is police training has moved a lot away from what it used to be to adult learning because we're trying to attract a very different type of person now. And you can't yell at people. You can't do anything to people. There's very few stress days anymore. So I don't know if we're moving closer to reality of what the street's going to be like because you get treated like shit out there. So sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, that's just it. And this is exactly why during my graduate program, I chose to focus on police leader development practices. Having come from the military, transitioning into policing, I assumed the two professions would be fairly on par with each other. Boy, was I stunned to find out how far removed police training was from our military counterparts. In terms of leader development, for instance, we were talking about the importance of procedures over, say, how the job is actually done. And I can't speak to your collective experiences, but in Toronto, at least, and certainly a lot of the GTA police organizations, in order to get promoted from constable to sergeant, your very first assessment is your ability to memorize procedure. That's the screening process, not your demonstrated leadership expertise, not your knowledge, education, skills, or abilities. It's rote memorization. And you might think that the military adopts similar practices, but they've long since moved away from that sort of mindset in favor of things like checklists. I read a really good book a while back called the Checklist Manifesto. It's a really short read, really easy read as well. And it's written. Forgive me, but I can't remember the author's name. The book's behind me here, but it's written by a medical doctor who was asked by the United Nations to find out why so many people were dying in hospital after surgery in a particular context. And what he found through his research was that, despite having all of these highly educated, highly professional people like doctors, ER nurses, and anesthesiologists, what have you, more often than not, they were missing steps along the way. Simple things like washing your hands or communicating with the operating team about the intentions going into surgery. And by implementing a simple checklist, not one that you had to memorize, but one that you simply used as an aid memoir, they were able to increase mortality rates by something like 50%. It was something ridiculous. Don't quote me on the number, but anyway, all I mean to say is that the military has since moved away from those trainings that focus on memorization, instead allowing you to rely on those checklists in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. And do you have something there, Mark, or no?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in because it's such a good point. Like for those of you out there in law enforcement or related professions, like you need to start adopting this because we did. Like, that's what we use in our medic stuff. Like we have checklists, we have all these medications, we have all these policies, procedures. You can't memorize everything. It's not realistic to know everything. Like it's like the criminal code. Any cop out there, you're going to tell me you've memorized everything in the criminal code? No way. I don't believe you. Like you can't, right? But you can memorize one section. Fine, fair enough. Good on you. But it's just not realistic. And it's so smart. So we started building that into our training now, where we have something, we call it crisis resource management. I don't know if you guys use something similar in the military there, Matt, or even in your time in Toronto, but it's how to like flatten that power differential. Because what we'd run into is like, okay, in the medical example, the nurse can recognize the doctor's making a mistake, but feels afraid to tell them because they're going to be criticized. And the culture there is that the person with all the power gets to make the say and everyone else shuts up and just does what they're told.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good culture. And we need to get away from that. Like we live in a very hierarchical, paramilitary, rank matters. Like you and me can have difference of opinion. And if you have a higher rank, you're almost always going to win. And that's not ideal when we want the better idea to actually win. So we need to recognize those power differentials and then try and work within the system to minimize the impacts, right?
And this is where, I'm skipping a little ahead here, but I think this is where those traits like in-group solidarity can actually become counterproductive in policing. Like that, I'm going to call it blind loyalty. Of course, that's an exaggeration, but that sort of that emphasis that our colleagues can do no wrong it tends to create these like power dynamics, particularly in the context of like seniority, where we don't feel that we're empowered to call out our colleagues. We've seen post George Floyd all of these active bystander intervention trainings that have come out of that, because there's this recognition that we need to start developing a mindset in our teams that it's okay to question the actions of your colleagues. Like at the end of the day, we're trying to help each other.
This is something that I've seen just being on the team that I'm on. So in the gang suppression unit, I've been there just over 6 years. We've had lots of new people come through the unit, and every person that gets there, they always say right at the start, it's like, "Hey, I'm just the new guy. Like I'm just here to tell me what to do," or like, "I'm not going to question this," or whatever it might be. And my response to that every single time, and I even did this when I was in patrol with recruits, is you were some person before this. You have experiences. It's not like if you see something, point it out. Let me know. Like I don't have the answers to everything, and I want that input. I want that feedback. So yeah, that's very much a thing that, yeah, I want to say there's like almost like a generational shift we kind of saw where you can see it with like, say, certain age of people that have been in the service for some time.
Yeah.
And it's very much like, yeah, just do what this person says because they're the boss, or do what they said because they've been here for X amount of years. It's like, yeah, but
Mhm.
that's a stupid way of doing it. Like, why are we doing it like that? The bad guys have changed how they do things, or society has different expectations, and we got to change and meet those, or try and stop the crime. But we're just keep going
Yeah,
around and around with the same ideas.
and we're seeing the exact same challenges in uh, different workplaces outside of policing. It's no different in the private sector. There's a very very clear generational divide. It's the same in the military, where say like the generation that came before us was brought up in a culture where blind obedience to rank and position was the norm. Whereas I would argue that our generation is one that I'm going to say better educated, generally speaking, but comes from a background of asking why.
Hmm.
We want to understand why is it that we're doing the things that we do, rather than simply doing things the way they've always been done. Like, for example, when like you had mentioned, I spent nearly 18 years in the military. I had an opportunity to deploy to Kandahar in 2006 as part of the NATO-led International Security Assistance Force mission there. And as a reservist, in order to deploy, I had to spend 6 months in Petawawa, Ontario, with the regular force, guys and girls, to integrate into their team. And I still remember the very first day, the entire battle group got together. There was 3,000 of us in this giant parade square. And they had the commanding officer and the regimental sergeant major come and address us as a group. And this sergeant major, oh man, like grizzly old timer, like supplanted from the World War II era. And I remember him addressing the group and saying, look, with his East Coaster accent, he said to us, look, I get that, there's some younger generation people here who want to know why they're doing what they're doing. And he says, I don't care. You can ask that question. But when I tell you to jump off a bridge, you're jumping off that bridge. You can ask why and look over the edge and choose where you're going to land. But when I say jump, you jump. And I thought that encapsulated it perfectly.
Yeah, you're spot on there. Go ahead, Mark.
I think there's a time and a place for both kinds of leadership. And I've had people in leadership positions who wanted that for everything, as though there's times when, yeah, we can actually ask why and talk about it. And there's times when, hey, it's dangerous. And, there's a guy with a gun over there. There's no time for asking why. And let's go talk about our feelings. Like, we just got to do what we got to do. And I think we got to really recognize those differences of when it's time to just follow orders and it's time someone needs to take charge and we need a command structure, and that there is time to be more inclusive and to consult with people and seek input and delegate and all that. I would like to go back to one other thing, because Matt, you have said about how important that middle management leadership, right? Your corporal, your sergeant, even your staff sergeant, like those NCOs, you're right. It's so crucial. And you also talked about how we choose our leaders, because I think that is such a key part of how we shift policing culture. I recently wrote the promotional exam for the RCMP. I was promoted to corporal in the last year. I didn't study for it at all. And I'll be honest with you, I'd heard enough about it, and I didn't think it was a great test, and I didn't think that studying for it was going to make a big difference. And instead, what I suspect would truly, really benefit not only my organization, but others, is have a reading list. Have a reading list. Like, you'd mentioned some books on here. Have a reading list of like the Brene Browns and the Jockos and the, Simon Sinek, and like people that put out great leadership concept. If we want to like radically redefine what policing culture is, it starts by having like empathetic leaders who care about their people, who have the courage to speak up and communicate effectively and do the right thing. Now, all of a sudden, we have healthier cops who are more ready to help people, who feel supported in the mission they're doing, who feel like they understand the why. It's not just go do this because I tell you. It's like, hey guys, here's the priority from the top. Here's why I'm asking us to do this. You'll get that buy-in, and we'll get the better outcomes. But I think often my suspicion is that much police conduct actually comes back to mental health. And when we look at
Mhm.
mental health rates out of like studies like SIPCERT, right? PTSD, mental health disorders, even anxiety, depression are really high. And I think if we did a better job of having supportive leaders, we would change that, and then we would change the outcomes, and ultimately we would change our culture over the long term.
Yeah, the leadership practices in policing, broadly speaking, tend to be characterized as authoritarian, as I say, because I said it. I'm the one in a position of power, but also reactionary in nature, and transactional. So if you're familiar with the full range leadership model at all, that came out of the 1980s, Bernard Bass and James Burns. Um, the concept of transactional leadership is one where it's an exchange between the leader and the follower. The leader wants a certain behavior, and in exchange offers a transaction, some sort of reward, whether or not that's time off, paycheck, a pat on the back, something like that. But our understanding of leadership has evolved such that we now, like Mark had mentioned, we now recognize the importance of having people who are empathetic, who treat their followers like the unique individuals they are with their unique wants and needs, as opposed to a simple badge number. Leaders who seek to inspire and motivate, who try to compel us to see why we're doing things the way we're doing, but also who afford us the psychological safety to do things differently, to think outside the box. And then importantly, the sort of last key component of transformational leadership is walking the walk, is role modeling the behavior that you expect to see in your people. Unfortunately, today, I mentioned in grad school I had the opportunity to study police leader development practices, and as part of that study, I had the opportunity to survey some of the larger police services here in Ontario to ask, how is it that you're developing your people? Who is it that you're developing? When are you developing them? What sort of ideology is informing your training? And I was just absolutely stunned by the findings. Like for police leadership development, at least in the province of Ontario, and certainly in some places in the United States, has not advanced in decades. It lacks any sort of purpose or methodology. The people, or at least in
I would say it's non-existent. From my experience.
Absolutely. There's certainly no benchmarking against what other police services are doing. There's no unified direction from state, like in Ontario. We have provincial law that governs the minimum sort of trainings that police services must undergo. There used to be this manual called the Ontario Policing Standards Manual 2000. It literally has not been updated in 24 years, and didn't mention the word leadership once. It blows my mind.
That's crazy to think. It's from 2000, and so 24 years. That's literally a whole nother human being coming into policing now at 24 years old.
Yeah,
it's a whole different generation.
Exactly. So I wrote I published an article recently for HQ magazine. That's the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police trade magazine. That talks about this. That summarizes the findings from the research. And the light at the end of the tunnel is they've just started having this discussion at the provincial level. Ontario's Ministry of the Solicitor General is looking at establishing some sort of benchmark or baseline minimum training. But all I can say is we're decades behind the game here. The military has been doing this since the late 90s, early 2000s.
And I'll let you finish on this point here, Mark. I'm just going to add in, I like what you're saying there just about kind of walking the walk for the leadership, Matt. And one of the things that I was looking at, and I just had this discussion with someone last night, but it's like for new guys coming into the gang unit, one of the things I've been telling them is like, listen to podcasts and here's books to read, because there's people out there with answers and different ideas that work all around the world. Like we can't just keep looking internally and just keep doing the same thing we did yesterday, because the bad guys, they're changing their game. They get disclosure. They know how things work. They learn, they evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we're not doing that. And that's both on trying to be a better police officer and stop crime, and that's trying to be a better leader. And how do you talk to people? And just on that, when you're talking about how you talk to people in the positional authority, that goes the same for source handling. And that's something I've coached to people. It's like, I can't just have a transactional relationship. Hey, if you give me this piece of info or something good, I won't give you this whatever charge. Well, why not just do your job, give them the charge if they deserve the charge, and try to build some kind of camaraderie, some relationship, whatever you want to call it,
Respect.
but have something there that's a little more, because over time, that's where you're going to build those relationships where it's an effective relationship and you can get good information, right? So there's lots of different aspects that this comes into, not just talking about just the leadership from a constable to a supervisor or something. So, sorry, Mark, did you have something you want to add there?
Yeah, well, I'll slightly echo what you both just said about the walking the walk. When it comes to culture and leadership, like that's so crucial. When I used to teach R2MAR in the RCMP, this was before being a member of the RCMP. I was a seconded Delta Police member at the time. And I used to say the commissioner of the RCMP is not going to come here and set the culture in your workplace. You have to do it. And it's the truth, because we have all these little subcultures and we interact with culture and it changes. It's not static. It changes based on how we interact. We actually change someone's thought pattern and behavior. And often if we do nothing, it will continue. So one of the examples I use is when someone does the like, hey, did you guys hear who's off duty mad? Or like, we're putting someone down, right?
Yeah.
That's your chance, man. You want to change culture? Have the courage to stand up and say something. You don't need to berate them in front of everyone. It can like be as simple as, hey, we're not going to do that here. And after you pull them aside and you say, hey, man, like you're spreading stigma throughout our culture by doing that, right? And now everyone here is not going to ask for help when they need it. And that's really the problem, right? If we're talking like 50% of cops, as per some of the SIPCERT research, would meet the diagnosable condition for a mental health disorder. The problem isn't all these cops faking it. It's like some of my friends where I see them show up to work and I'm like, you look terrible. What happened? And they're like, oh, I haven't slept at all. And it's from all the trauma and the nightmares. So that's really what it is. But I think we often lack the ability or the know-how, or we haven't been taught how to have the difficult conversation, right? Even as a leader, sometimes I've had leaders who lie to you because they don't have the courage to tell you the truth. Right? I'd way rather just hear the truth. You're not going to get what you want, and here's why, as opposed to lying to me. And eventually we're going to figure it out anyways. And I think one of the other things you talked about was around positional authority. And we have to kind of understand the roles of positional authority too, because that's crucial. Right. And I know of people in leadership positions where it's like, listen, constable, I'm a such and such rank, and you need to listen. Like if you've needed to do that, I can tell you guaranteed you're failing as a leader.
Yeah.
Because that, like you shouldn't need to do that. You should be building a relationship, building trust, explaining, and maybe listening to their ideas. Like maybe you don't have the best ideas on everything. Maybe the people around you also can be experts and bring their own great ideas. And instead of just trying to hammer your idea onto everyone, you should again use that participatory leadership. Like you're including everyone in their ideas, and you'll get more buy-in from them that way.
Mark, what was that phrase you used? Off work mad? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so it's a term I've heard, like off-duty mad, off-duty sad, which we're describing the person who's gone off work with, a mental health condition, a PTSD, stress injury. There's a variety of terms, psychological injury, right. And it's just it's a derogatory term used to kind of slander them, and it's something we need to stand up to. And when you hear it, say something about it.
The raises a really, really good, important point too. Like to sort of tie this back into culture here, the sort of prevailing mindset among academics is that the cultural traits, the persistent ones that we see in policing, like solidarity, social isolation, cynicism, pessimism, are the consequence of stressors in the workplace. And I think Mark mentioned this earlier. But it's important to recognize that these stressors can be divided into two different groups. We have our occupational, or I like to call them operational stressors. They're the stressors that come with the job. It's the danger, the unpredictability, that the trauma even that produce operational stress injuries. Now, what's interesting is that there's research out there that suggests that police officers tend to rate organizational stressors as being more stressful than the operational stuff. And when I say organizational stressors, I mean things like the type of supervision that we receive, the type of leaders that we end up working for. It's these guys that end up producing outcomes like being quote unquote off work mad or off work sad.
Yeah. You know what? And that's a great point. I honestly think that would be a great second podcast and talking about the operational versus organizational stressors. This has come up on a number of with a number of guests that I've had on here, and consistently it's been the stuff that's within the organization that people have said is by far like the worst thing to deal with.
I think it's important to recognize that, like, as police officers, when you're signing up to do the job, I think we all recognize that there's going to be danger, there's going to be trauma, we're going to be exposed to those kinds of things. But what you don't expect when you sign up to be a police officer is to have to deal with terrible supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I'll be honest, man. Of all the trauma I've been to in my career, that was the hardest thing for me. And it's actually, I don't speak often about it, and I try not to go into a ton of detail, but I've been through a harassment process with a supervisor that was founded within my organization, and it was the worst experience of my life. And it's actually why I wrote a chapter in my book on organizational stress, moral injuries, sanctuary trauma, and just because no one prepares us for it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was killing me. And when I learned about it, it helped me to manage it, and it helped me to let go of some of that pain. And I think we need to teach people about it ahead of time. So I'll throw it back over to you there, Nathan.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. And I think it'd be a great discussion. We could do a second one on. So one of the things I just kind of want an extension of what we've been talking about, I want to move on to, and kind of the thing that got this whole discussion started in the first place, talking about police culture, sense of belonging, and some of the symbolism that's used in it. So I'm wondering, how can we develop a sense of belonging and camaraderie with things like symbols or challenge coins or whatever else it might be out there, while owning that, but also talking about some of the narratives, like some of the negative things that come out of it. So when we talk about the thin blue line, all of a sudden it's getting used as a white supremacist symbol in the States, I believe. I've never actually seen it used as that, but apparently it's being used in the States as that, but people wear it all over the world. Police all over the world use it as kind of like I don't know, something to show that, like, hey, we're all part of a bigger thing. So, who owns these symbols? Who controls the narrative around them and what they mean? I'll kind of let you start on this, Matt, because on LinkedIn, where some of the discussion got going, you had a different opinion on this, and I thought it was really good. And then some people had different opinions. So I think this would be a great discussion. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief to start off this conversation. But I think we all understand that symbols matter. They mean things to people. They communicate concepts. And in the context of culture, if we're referring to Edgar Schein's research or his contributions to this area, he talks about the idea of how culture is really founded on the idea of underlying assumptions, but they're subconscious in nature. If you ask somebody to articulate why they do things the way they do, it's often very difficult. Like if I were to ask either of you, why do we drive on the right side of the road? We're kind of dumbfounded. We're just left to say, oh, it's because we've always done it that way. But there are visible symbols of culture, and refer to those as artifacts, and they're things like the language, the words that we use, the ceremonies and rituals that we prioritize, the stories that we tell in the workplace, the stories that we emphasize, more importantly. And then we have our physical structures and symbols. It's a visible representation of our espoused values. And the blue line flag is a really interesting symbol, rather. Whether it's a flag, a patch, or an icon of some sort. It's a symbol that has been around for decades now and it's stood the test of time. But it's also one that has evolved with time. my understanding is that the blue line originally was a representation of the role of police in separating chaos from order or society from danger. It later evolved to be used as a symbol, when an officer died, or to sort of represent mourning or loss. But today, particularly in the last 5 years, with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, that symbol has been I'm going to use the word co-opted, because I don't think that anybody owns the symbol, but certainly more applicable to the police realm. But it has been visible in counter demonstrations to the Black Lives Matter movement. So for members of society who maybe weren't exposed to the symbol prior to, say, 2020, its meaning now more broadly is one of defensive solidarity. It represents the division between the police and the public, and so it has adopted this negative connotation. There's so much more to unpack there, but Mark, if you want to jump in.
Sure, thanks. I will appreciate your outlook, and you've referenced some of the same things I do, and I like to speak about. I will give a slightly different perspective and maybe context to my take of it, because I think symbols are crucial, and so much of what you said, like they're physical representations of ideas. I'm totally agreeing with you. But to me, what that is, that what a physical representation of that idea. So I'll give you how I see the thin blue line used. Okay. I typically see it used the most when a police officer has been killed. Okay. And to me, what I think that is being used to express is a shared understanding amongst those who are in that profession of the danger and truly of the pain. Like, it's the emotional pain of the loss. And like, I've been to police funerals of people I've never met, and I've been in tears because even though they're a stranger, I identify with them because we share this bond of policing. And I think there's an element of like shared hardship that people can go through. And I think there's a real difference in how society perceives violence and danger. And I think some of those who have like an anti-police bias or maybe mental model, they perceive that the problem is the police doing violence against society. So it's just this person was walking down the street and for some reason a cop came up and shot them, and the cop should be charged with murder. We often hear a couple terms. Police accountability is one of them. Police brutality is another one. Police militarization would be a third. And I think each of those terms are often highly misused to represent that it's actually these horrible cops that are out killing everyone. And I think the reality is we actually do have a dangerous, violent world. Now, I'm not saying in every place, every time is always dangerous, but the reality is how many police officers have been killed in the last, year, 2 years, 3 years, whether that's Canada, whether that's US, how many citizens have been killed? Because we do a great job at keeping track. Well, I should say we've done a better job of keeping track of the number of people who are shot and killed by police. But we fail to track all the people they killed before the police interacted with them. So like I know of situations where someone's just killed 3 people. There's an emergency alert issued across everyone's cell phone in the area to watch out for this. The cops run into them and they stop this person. They stop the threat before they've killed the 4th person. Now we'll count that. We'll aggregate that statistic as a police shooting for the year. And somewhere, often, no offense, Matt, but an academic will say how there's still too many police shootings, how we have failed at de-escalation and we need to reform our culture because we need more accountability. You're like, hold on a minute. That person, for whatever reason, maybe they had a traumatized childhood, maybe they had all their reasons, they've gone and killed 3 people, and they probably would have killed a whole lot more if we didn't stop them. But it's that difference of perception of the actual violence in society. And I think much of society doesn't really understand it. Like, we're so disconnected from our safety and security as members of society. And I actually listed that in my book. I talked about my dad. He just turned 77 and he's an accountant. He runs an accounting business and he's never seen a situation where violence is the answer. And I think that is our average citizen in today's society. They grow up in a world and they're told violence is wrong. And then they see a short clip of a police officer using violence, whether it's lethal force or not. And then they attribute that as, well, they failed to de-escalate. Like, they're starting from a premise that every situation is de-escalatable, if that's even a word. But every situation we can de-escalate, and that anytime we have not de-escalated, we have failed in our policing. And I just think that's such a flawed premise from society. And I'll end with one more thing. Some of the people who are the most boisterous, vocal, anti-police, spokespeople, I'll say, and the most vocal against the thin blue line, I think they have a perceived bias that's out of line with reality, where they think
Oh,
that
sure.
it's just that the police are out killing, people of marginalized groups because of their racism, and you're like, no, that's not really what's happening. The cops are running into danger to keep members of society safe. If the cops just want to keep themselves safe, they wouldn't go anywhere near the scene. We're giving them guns and a vest because they're really going to dangerous things. And I just think we need to reframe the narrative, because often back to the role of rank, our chiefs and our leaders are very hesitant of public perception, and they don't really want to get into the debate or the argument, and they don't often it's a one-way flow of communication. So let's call it a special interest group says, well, we don't like this symbol, you need to get rid of it. And rather than say, hey, here's what it means to our officers, because I think one of you said, like, who gets to define a symbol?
Yeah.
Like, take the Christian cross. It can be used as a symbol of love and of sacrifice and of all kinds of good. But there's people out there that attribute it as a sign of bad. Well, who's right and who gets to define it? And that's my perception, is that I think as police, it's okay if we have a symbol, and if we're willing to communicate about it, I don't think it needs to be bad.
In one of the papers that you wrote there, I thought you brought up it was the Toronto Police Division 51, and it was kind of like a bulldog. It's a bulldog flexing. He's got some big teeth, and he's just kind of blowing out the Toronto Police symbol, like coming through the middle of it. And when I was looking at that and reading what you had wrote, I was like, okay, I could see how some people might say, like, well, that's aggressive, and maybe it means police are out there beating people up, or they're being violent for no reason. But then I tried to look at it from the other side, and I was thinking, like, I don't know, like, if I was a person who likes the police, I'd want my police to look like that. And I want them to be the big, strong dog on the block. And that, like, who else is going to protect me? Like, we're not going to put a picture of Marshmallow Man up there, right? Like, it's just, so I was like, okay, I can see both sides. And it just depends on, I guess, maybe a bias or something, or your experiences, how you come at it. But yeah, I just thought it was a very interesting take on, like, how it goes, the thought process.
That's a really interesting symbol. Mark, I'm not sure if you've seen that one, but it's a really cool one. Don't get me wrong. Like, somebody put a lot of time and effort into it. It looks great. Very, very artistically pleasing. But the question that I posed in the article is this what we want to perceive our police as? And to your point, yes, if we're framing police officers as protectors and crime fighters, absolutely, that sort of aggressive stylizing of it would certainly be appropriate. But if you know anything about 51 Division, City of Toronto, it's one of the most storied divisions. It's Toronto's equivalent of the downtown East Side, which is kind of ironic because it is specifically Toronto's downtown East Side, and it's also the city's probably the most impoverished area of the city. There's a plethora of social services, shelters, supervised injection sites. Poverty and homelessness is just rife in these neighborhoods. And it's also, if memory serves, this division, particularly within the Regent Park neighborhood, is the single largest concentration of Canadian immigrants in the entire country. And so what I sort of argue in this paper is that, when you're policing in that sort of context, is an aggressive stylizing of police the appropriate symbol that we want to portray?
I think you're asking a really fair question, because I don't think we should just put out, like, hey, look how tough we are. We've all got our shirts off and we're flexing and we're here to scare you. We're here to keep you safe, right? And I think it actually partly comes back to us versus them, because I don't see this. I hear the thin blue line described as us versus them, Like it's the police versus everyone. And like them, that's my kids. Them, that's my parents. Like, no, it's not us versus them. I actually see it as us. Us is everyone. Us is society. And the people now stepping outside of society, taking guns and gangs and hostages and shootings, that's to them. We are the line between those few who step outside of the us and are trying to kill us. And now we're the ones trying to protect everyone that is us. And what I actually say with hostage takings, often it's actually two categories that are most often hostages. One, it's familial. It's like basically people taking their kids hostage. And two, it's drug trade related. So it's actually like you could be the gangster one day that we're arresting and pointing guns at, and we'll die to save your life tomorrow. And that's no joke, right? We'll literally and like we get criticized sometimes when we go to a call and it can turn into a suicide. And like, why was the ERT team there, the SWAT team there, too militaristic, and we needed mental health professionals? And it's like, hold on a minute. We had a rescue plan for that person's children. We had a rescue plan to go rescue them after they tried to kill themselves. Like we're willing to put our lives on the line to save them. And I guess that's the difference of what it means to me. And I'm with you. It's not a one-way flow of communication. We shouldn't just be telling everyone we're the police, too bad for you. Back to the example of the woman saying, get out of my way while I drive, in a really arrogant way. We shouldn't do that. That's not good for us. But could we put something out that's more productive, educational? Hey, we're trying to save people's lives. Like, because you get the complaints over the cop turned on their lights, went through the intersection, then turned them back off. Like, so we basically we need to help the public understand. And I just would like to see a two-way flow of communication that's good on both sides. And I don't think it can be dictated by either side unilaterally, which I think is a part of what I'm hearing from you. And I agree with you on that.
On that, I think you make a really good point just on the anti-police. Like if you look at the anti-police, the true people who just put out all the negative stuff about us and we can do no good, they seem to be missing that point of when they say it's the us versus them. It's like, but we have families in the community too. We have friends in the community. Like, so that gets completely lost in the discussion and they just go out there and shout all these things. Whereas I think the blue line symbol in particular, when we're talking about these things, but it could be all the other kind of logos, it is talking about us putting our lives on the line, being the ones to stand at the kind of the front of danger when we're protecting the in-group, which is society, our community, our block, whatever it might be, against the people who choose to be the outside, who choose to pick up the gun, who choose to sell the drugs. So that's kind of my take on it. And go ahead there, Matt.
Yeah, it's like the meaning behind the thin blue line symbol is, I think we can agree, is contentious at the moment. I agree with everything that Mark said. It certainly meant all of that in my experience. Clearly, the line divided, us from them, us being quite literally, broader society, and them being those who would do us harm. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of who's co-opted the symbol, it's taken on this new sort of like defensive solidarity meaning, and until that mindset shifts, certain people are going to view it that way. And so I think it was one of you had asked, who owns the symbol? Who gets to dictate what it means? And the answer is none of us. The fact of the matter is it's going to mean different things to different people. But my argument is that here we've seen a handful of police services outright ban the wearing of the symbol. My position is that it's not an official symbol. It's not a part of the uniform. It's not representative of policing on any official level. And if the public it takes an issue with it, or even if it's just a minority view that takes an issue with it, who are we to argue that? At the end of the day, we serve the public, all of them, whether they agree with our stance or not. And like I mentioned in the LinkedIn post, the only real symbol that matters in our profession is the badge.
Yeah, and I would agree. Like I don't think the uniform belongs to the police service. they say you can't just hang whatever pins and different things you want on there. Like, yeah, you can't. Like, I think that is totally
Yeah.
a good point. But I just wonder, like, in the whole ownership of it, I think there can be pushback from the higher ups or whoever's in front of the cameras or speaking to the community
Yep.
groups, because there's an education component to be had there. I always wonder this, like, so if we all just took up the pride flag and said, okay, the pride flag is now a whole police wear it all the time, and we're going to say this is our in group and this is us. Like, at what point have we co-opted that, and now someone's just going to say, well, I don't like that anymore, right? Like, it's just, where do we stop? Where do we draw the line on the meaning of these things to people?
It's funny you mentioned the pride flag, because there's a story that comes to mind in the context of Toronto police, at least. For the longest time, different months passed by, and it would be, breast cancer awareness month or Pride month or what have you. And as sort of like a morale boosting initiative, you could buy different epaulets for your uniform that would be in different shapes, forms, and colors. So you during Pride Month, you could buy like a rainbow colored epaulet. They did one for military appreciation around Remembrance Day. So I've got a pair of epaulets that are cat pad. They're camouflage. They have no business belonging on a police uniform, but it was a thing that a previous police chief had implemented. And then when our last chief came in, James Raymer, he shut that down. Said, "Look, it's getting out of hand. We've got all these uniforms with different colored epaulets on them.
Yeah.
Some rainbow, some green for mental health, some whatever. It's a uniform. Uniform means the same." So he had kind of quashed that. But then, fun fact, we got a new police chief last year, and they're back.
Well, on the blue line stuff, especially police memorial ribbons, they're black and blue, and we have magnets that we can put on the cars when it's that time. And I always wondered that. I'm like, well, so I can't have a blue line and a straight line, but as long as it kind of swirls around itself, it's okay. So it's just like, where's the end of this? Like, so go ahead, Mark.
Sure. I got a few points just from some of it, but I'll start actually by asking you a question, Matt, just for your experience. Because you mentioned that the thin blue line is contentious. And I would agree with you that I think there are some people who are trying to make it contentious. I think it's in a way back to their mental model with a bit of an anti-police bias, or a lot, in all honesty. And it's the latest kind of phase to attack. Can you tell me of a time that you personally saw the thin blue line used in any kind of like racist way, or just like in your organization, in your subculture? Again, I'll speak after that to how I've seen it used, but have you personally witnessed a coworker or someone using it in a really negative, nefarious type of way?
Yeah, so not a coworker, certainly not. Mind you, the myriad of coworkers that I saw who wore the patch or had a sticker or what have you. I didn't stop to ask, hey, what does that mean to you? Because at the end of the day, I don't care what it means to that person. I care what it means to me. I adopted that sort of interpretation. But I have seen it used in the context of like the Blue Lives Matter movement as a counter demonstration to the Black Lives Matter movement. In which case, my own views on the use of that symbol started to shift.
Okay. So, and the reason I ask is because obviously our experience shapes our perception. And where I see it used regularly is when a police officer is murdered, and all the police officers I know, not all, a large number of them post it on social media. And I think it's used primarily as an expression of pain, of loss, of shared camaraderie with that person, and of shared perception of the reality of the danger within society that much of the rest of society doesn't really understand. And I think it kind of ties back in. Like, so for example, there is a First Nations chief in BC. He's the head of the First Nations chiefs. And he has said wearing a thin blue line patch on your shoulder or on your uniform, is no different than wearing a Nazi swastika. And like the Nazi swastika represents white supremacy, represents like skinheads, represents neo-Nazis, represents the murder of countless millions of people in Europe and the Holocaust. Like it's such a farce and it's such a hyperbolic statement and so inaccurate. And I think when we don't actually challenge it, I think it goes back to this. The leaders of the police organizations are like, somebody doesn't like it. Some people don't like it. We should just stay away from it. Instead of like, I think it was Adam Palmer, who's the chief of Vancouver, stood up about it and had said, that's not what I see. I don't see it being used that way. And that's not what I see. So like, that's not what I've seen from the other officers. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been misused at some place in some time. But I think if you truly took what this symbol is used as, 99.99 something percent of the time, it's used to represent shared pain, shared danger. It's meant to be a symbol of positivity. Just like I think most of the time, most of the cops are actually doing a lot of good. Despite that there is the odd little bad thing that happens here and there. So to me, it's part of a bigger issue where they're trying to say, okay, we need more accountability. And in all honesty, I don't know if you're familiar with the situation in British Columbia, but they've been charging police officers like crazy. Like one of my best friends got charged at a hostage taking for shooting a hostage taker, and he did nothing wrong, but he got charged just because he's a cop that shot somebody. And that's like we're seeing, in BC, they've charged, I think it was 39 cops they've charged, and they haven't got a single conviction. As we've been talking about symbols, obviously the thin blue line is a key symbol that we're talking about here, but I really see it as part of a bigger issue. And I think it's that some people in society don't understand the police, don't perceive there to be real danger. And I think it causes them to really dislike the police and to almost have a confirmation bias. When they see violence, they attribute it to bad cop, bad police work. They think they know police work, even though they really know nothing about police work. And there's actually another symbol that's even part of this, which is the ACAB, right? Stands for all cops are bastards. And you regularly see it, it's used in the same way that like fuck the police, right? We'll see a police officer killed and someone who hates the cops will post fuck the police and will post ACAB. And I actually think it's a form of prejudice. I think that police officers can experience prejudice. And I think we're kind of, we're in a place where we're not, like, feel uncomfortable saying that. Oh, but no, we're a privileged group. We're not allowed to say that police officers experience prejudice. I actually think that they experience a lot of times where we're treated with, oh, you're a police officer. Like I have this certain perception of what that means. And we've even seen it. It was on Vancouver Island. They had a publicly funded mural and they included within that ACAB in some anti-police, kind of demonstration against the police. And when the police found out, they basically were very upset about it and essentially made them change it. And even what they changed it to was still a pretty bad representation. And that's right where actually they had the BMO shooting, where a couple guys went in with SKS guns, and they basically just did a robbery, pretty much to recreate the North Hollywood shootout, and came out and had a giant shootout and shot a bunch of the police officers. So I think we need to, this is how I see the issue. Yes, it's two-way communication. Yes, we should listen to the community, much like your I think it was a bullfrog symbol for Division 51. I think we need to be cognizant of the image we're putting out. But I don't think it should just be that we accept a narrative put out by people who have an anti-police bias. And when someone says the thin blue line is the same as a Nazi swastika, I think police leaders need to stand up and say, absolutely not. That's outrageous. And we need to reshift the narrative, because so often we let the media and some of the anti-police groups define the issue. And I think that's where this is one of the issues that I personally don't see it being used for bad, the thin blue line symbol. I don't wear it on a uniform because I'm not supposed to, and I do try to follow policy where I can. But I do think we need to push back and, in a way, educate the public, still listen to the public. But if we're talking a small fringe minority, like I just think we're basically taking it too far in a way when we let them define the narrative.
And Mark, on that, I just want to add, this is something that I've been thinking about, where it's like, are police an identifiable group, right? And I think what people would argue is, well, you take your uniform off at the end of the day. It's like, but do you really? Like, you take a lot of the stuff home with you. You go out and, police act applies to you 24/7. If I do something off duty, I could get charged even though nobody knows I'm a cop. So police is an identifiable group. And then there's even a charge for assault PO, right? Like there's separate charges for doing things to police officers.
I just want to add one thing because what you said is so important. So in British Columbia, there's a lower charging standard for a police officer than every other person in society.
Hmm.
Now, please, like, I would love someone to help that make sense to me. Now, I get the idea of like, wow, but police need to be held to a higher standard. So just to be clear, we're going to go send you to shootings and hostage takings and all the most dangerous things. And we're going to charge you more easily than the gangsters, the criminals, and all the other people you're responding to. I'm sorry, I don't think that's fair. And back to your other point, I think cops are often targeted because when we look at this anti-police narrative,
Yeah.
look at the Dallas shooting from back, I think it was 2016. Micah Johnson, right? You can watch on YouTube. He's negotiating with the negotiator and basically saying how the cops are the real terrorists. So here he's heard so much through the media and through the echo chamber of all these racist white cops killing people, and he's doing good by going to kill a bunch of strangers in a uniform just because they're wearing a police uniform. Like that's the extreme of where this can get to, and it's why we need to do a better job of talking with the public. And I think that includes listening. So Matt, I definitely want to echo the part from you because I think that's a part of what you're saying is we shouldn't just dictate to them, and I'll agree with you. But I don't think we should also just let the public fully dictate to the police without more two-way communication.
Yeah, communication is always going to be important in these environments, especially coming from the police, where traditionally we've. That's part of what the blue line represents for some people is the lack of transparency, that sort of blue wall of silence, so to speak. Mark, you said some people don't understand policing, and that's a very common theme in the literature around police culture. It's certainly persistent. It's certainly a mindset that a lot of police officers have, and it makes sense. We have a very unique profession. There's a common theme on one of these like police meme pages that I follow, and in terms of talking about symbols, there's one challenge coin or patch that they sell. It's the ticket to the show, right? It's that front row seat that you get as a police officer, where you're exposed to this different side of society that others don't have the privilege to be exposed to. But Nathan, you had mentioned our police and identifiable group, and I say absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of the challenge here around the controversy with the blue line symbol. It's a symbol that represents part of that identity, like what it means to be a police officer. Mark, you'll love this book. If you haven't read it already, there are these two Canadian academics, actually, Jay Van Bavel and Dominic Packer, who wrote a book called The Power of Us. A recent publication in the last couple of years. And it really just speaks to identity formation and the influence that groups have on our behavioral norms. And one of the things that Van Bavel and Packer mentioned, that groups are especially attractive. They provide three things to us. Those three things are belonging, distinctiveness, and status. Having read some of your book, Mark, I know you referenced Carlin's friendship formula, and the sort of four elements that build friendship are proximity, frequency, duration, and intensity. And obviously things that policing provides. But the important thing to take away from this is that policing also becomes an attractive group to be a member of because it gives you that sense of belonging. It's distinct from the rest of society, and it carries with it status. And this matters because the stronger our membership in a group, the more likely we are to conform to the norms of that group. And so when we talk about challenges to the blue line, really how I perceive it is an attack on our identity, our group belonging. There are parallels. There are certainly parallels to the use of the swastika or the Confederate flag, and while those have adopted more nefarious meanings and recent decades, the fact of the matter is that these symbols can evolve. Their meanings can evolve over time. I was reading recently that about 10 or even 15 years ago, the English flag was seen as a symbol of nationalism and white supremacy, only to readopt its meaning or its value as an identifier of English nationality. But the point is that meanings can ebb and flow, and we just happen to be in one of those times where a symbol that's value to our profession, to our group, has lost its meaning. And all I say to that is, at the end of the day, we work for the public, and it's their trust that matters. And somebody has to extend that olive branch. We have the badge. What's the big loss?
Yeah. Man, I think this is a great discussion with you two guys. We could go on for a long, long time. I think we're going to cut it here, though, because we're just coming up to an hour and a half. And we were thinking we were going to keep it around an hour. So I do want to make sure we just kind of end on giving you some time, both of you, to say, just what you're working on right now. So any projects on the go or where you're at with work, and how people can find your work. Where can they follow you?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. There's a few different things. I mean, I spent 4 years writing my book. So anyone who wants to check it out, it's called Setting My Sights on Stigma, Thoughts from an Injured Mind. You can find it on Amazon. I have a website, just my name, markbouchard.ca, and it's Mark with a K. Even Nathan doesn't know this, but I actually just started a YouTube channel. It's called Police Mentors. I only put one video up so far. But my plan is to start putting more out, just free educational content, because it's tough for a lot of people to sit down and read a book. But maybe you can watch a little 10-minute video, and maybe I'll get to throw on a few interviews like this over the longer term. And then lastly, I've been working on a lethal force psychology course, actually, much like I said, the police culture course, but the lethal force psychology course we actually just finished. So I'm going to be running a beta test in about 10 days. It's going to be delivered out of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. Joseph Burgundy runs that out of Texas. Really excited for that. So we're going to run a couple test modules, and then it's a 4-hour course as of right now, but we'll get some feedback and then look to expand it from there.
Awesome stuff. And I'll put up those links, and so people could go find that. It'll be in the episode description and throughout the week on social media. So if you could just let us know where people can find you and your work and any new projects you got on the go, Matt.
Yeah. So since leaving policing in December, I'm now a regular contributor to Policing Insight, which is a UK-based policing news and education platform. I've also founded my own public safety consultancy called Improvable Incorporated. That's improve.able, 2 separate words. I've had the opportunity to do some work with RCMP division, and I'm looking forward to working with other police services and police services boards to drive that much needed culture change and leadership development that we've been talking about. If you're interested in following me, I'm on all the regular platforms: Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. The best, probably one-stop shop is website www.com. There you'll find links to all the social media stuff and my publications.
Great stuff. Well, I'm going to say thanks for coming on the show today, guys. Hang on a second for 2 seconds after I'll talk to you offline. But I want to remind everybody to like, comment, share The Quiet Professional, and I will get the links up to all of your guys' stuff in the episode description and once I start posting on social media. So yeah, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thanks a lot, Nathan. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.